April 28, 1945. A field of churned mud 3 kilometers west of Nauen, Germany. The air is thick with the metallic scent of cordite and the sweet, cloying smell of apple blossoms from a nearby orchard, a grotesque perfume for the death of a nation. For 20-year-old Hanna Vogel, a section leader in a female auxiliary anti-aircraft unit, the world has shrunk to the gray steel of her 20mm flak 38 cannon and the sliver of bruised sky visible beyond its sight. Her knuckles are white where she grips the traverse wheel. The gun mount is cold, slick with a fine mist that promises a miserable dawn. The thumping is no longer distant. It's a physical pressure in her chest, the percussive heartbeat of the American Third Army. For days, the radio chatter, crackling with desperation, had been their only connection to a command structure that was evaporating like morning fog. You are the final wall, the Führer's final hope. The words of the Gauleiter, screamed over the airwaves 2 days prior, now feel like a fever dream. Here, on the ground, there is no hope. There is only mud, fear, and the dwindling supply of ammunition in the wicker-lined cases at her feet. Lieselot, the youngest at 19, a signals auxiliary seconded to their battery, trembles as she feeds a fresh clip into the cannon. Her face is a pale smudge of dirt and terror. "They're so close," she whispers, her voice barely a thread of sound against the unending rumble. Hanna doesn't look at her. Heads down, eyes up. Do your duty for Germany. The words are automatic, a catechism learned over years of BDM rallies and newsreel exhortations. The enemy is a ravenous beast, the Judeo-Bolshevik hordes from the east, the gangster capitalists from the west. They are rapists, murderers, cultureless destroyers who will salt the earth of the fatherland. She has seen the posters, the caricatures of snarling, ape-like American soldiers. She believes it. You have to believe it, or the terror will swallow you whole. A different sound cuts through the artillery, a high-pitched mechanical scream, the grinding of metal treads chewing through the soft German soil. M4 Shermans. Hanna squints, her eyes stinging from exhaustion. She can see them, 3 of them, emerging from the woods. They are ugly, brutally functional machines, their long-barreled 76mm guns sniffing the air. Beside her, Elfriede Schmidt, a 24-year-old Red Cross nurse attached to their unit, presses herself into the shallow trench. Her helmet is gone, and her hands, usually so steady with bandages and morphine, are clasped tightly around a worn medical kit, a useless talisman against high-explosive shells. She has seen what artillery does to human bodies. She has no illusions about what the tanks will do. The first shell lands 50 meters away, a deafening crump that showers their position with dirt and splintered wood. Lieselot screams, a raw animal sound of pure fear. "Load," Hanna barks, her voice cracking. The automatic response kicks in. Lieselot fumbles another clip into place. Hanna spins the traverse wheel, the gears groaning in protest. She lines up the lead Sherman in her crosshairs. The distance is impossible, but it is all they have left. She stomps on the firing pedal. The 20mm cannon bucks and roars, spitting a stream of tracers that arc gracefully through the gloom before bouncing harmlessly off the tank's thick frontal plate. It's like throwing pebbles at a giant. The Sherman doesn't even slow. Its turret swivels, a slow, deliberate, almost lazy movement. There is a flash of orange, and the world dissolves into a white-hot roar. The earth heaves. Hanna is thrown from the gun platform, landing hard in the mud. Her ears ring with a piercing, high-frequency tone. The flak 38 is a twisted wreck of burning metal. Through the smoke, she sees figures dismounting from the tanks. They are tall, silhouetted against the fires, carrying rifles. The Americans, the monsters from the newsreels. They move with a disciplined, unhurried gait, spreading out, their weapons held at the ready. A voice, harsh and alien, cuts through the ringing in her ears, a command in English. She doesn't understand the words, but the meaning is unmistakable. It is over. She sees a GI approach Lieselot, who is curled into a ball, sobbing. He nudges her gently with his boot. Hanna pushes herself up, her mind screaming. The propaganda, the warnings, the images of violated German women, it all floods her senses. This is it. This is the moment they were warned about, the end of everything. The world reassembles itself slowly, piece by agonizing piece. The high-pitched whine in Hannah Vogel's ears fades to a dull roar, replaced by the guttural shouts of men and the clatter of equipment. She is on her knees in the mud. An American soldier stands over her, his M1 Garand held loosely but pointed in her direction. He is younger than she expected, with a dusting of freckles across his nose and weary, bloodshot eyes. He isn't snarling. He isn't a monster. He just looks profoundly tired. He gestures with the rifle. Aufstehen, hands up. The German is clumsy, heavily accented, but clear. Hannah slowly gets to her feet, her arms raised. Her body feels like one large bruise. Nearby, another GI is helping Elfrida, the nurse, to her feet. He sees the red cross on her armband and says something to his comrade. They herd the small group of survivors, Hannah, Elfrida, Lieselot, and 2 other auxiliaries, towards a collection point near the road. The demonization of the enemy had been total, a cornerstone of their existence for the past 12 years. They were taught that the American soldier was a degenerate, a product of a mongrel society, undisciplined and venal, motivated only by greed and bloodlust. Yet the men surrounding them move with a quiet, efficient professionalism that is itself unnerving. There is no gloating, no celebratory whoops, just the grim business of processing the captured. They are lined up, and a sergeant with a clipboard and a world-weary expression walks down the line. He confiscates their sidearms, a few pistols taken from fallen soldiers, and any knives. He doesn't take Elfrida's medical kit. He doesn't take the small, worn photo of Hannah's brother from her pocket. The process is impersonal, bureaucratic. It is this very lack of malice that is so disorienting. They were prepared for a fight to the death, for brutal martyrdom. They were not prepared for paperwork. They are loaded onto the back of a GMC truck. The canvas flaps are pulled down, plunging them into a swaying, diesel-fumed darkness. Lieselot is still crying softly, a continuous, hopeless sound. Elfrida puts an arm around her, whispering reassurances that sound hollow even to herself. Hannah sits rigid, staring at the canvas wall, trying to reconcile the reality of the past hour with the certainties that have defined her entire life. Where is the barbarism, the chaos? This feels less like the fall of civilization and more like a grim, efficient administrative procedure. The truck ride is long and jarring. When they finally stop and the flap is thrown open, the harsh daylight makes them squint. They are in a vast, open field sectioned off with coils of concertina wire. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, of German soldiers are already there, sitting in dejected clumps on the damp ground. This is a temporary collection area, a precursor to the real camps. An American officer, a captain, addresses the new arrivals through a translator. You are now prisoners of war under the authority of the United States Army. You will be treated in accordance with the Geneva Convention. You will obey all orders without question. The words are stark, devoid of emotion. Then comes the first true shock. A water truck arrives, followed by soldiers handing out rations. Not scraps or slop, but small, wax-covered cardboard boxes. K-rations. Hannah stares at the box in her hands. Inside, she finds crackers, a small can of processed cheese, a packet of sugar, 4 cigarettes, and a flat, dark brown bar. Chocolate. She hasn't seen real chocolate in over 2 years. She watches as a young GI, no older than Lieselot, shows a captured German boy, a Hitler youth barely 15, how to use a P38 can opener on his ration can. The American boy grins, says something in English, and ruffles the German boy's hair. The gesture is so casual, so human, it feels like a physical blow. This is not the enemy she was taught to hate. This is something far more confusing. As dusk falls, the temperature drops. They huddle together for warmth, the strange, foreign taste of American food in their mouths. In the distance, the watchtowers stand as stark silhouettes against the dying light. The wire gleams. The mundane humanity of their captors has cracked the foundation of their worldview, but the grim architecture of captivity looms all around them. The fear has changed. It is no longer the fear of a monstrous enemy, but the cold, terrifying fear of a completely unknown future. The journey ends in late May 1945 at a sprawling, purpose-built POW camp near Cherbourg, France. The temporary holding pens of the Rheinwiesenlager, with their mud and exposure, are replaced by a stark, ordered geometry of wooden barracks, watchtowers, and endless fences of barbed wire. This new world is governed by routine, by the blast of a whistle at dawn, by the metronomic tramp of guards' boots on gravel, by the thrice-daily ritual of roll call. For Hannah, Elfrida, and Lieselot, assigned to Barrack 17 in the women's compound, the shock of capture gives way to the slow, grinding reality of imprisonment. The compound is overseen not by combat-weary GIs, but by women, members of the American Women's Army Corps, the WWII. Their commanding officer is Captain Eleanor Roosevelt, a stern, no-nonsense woman in her late 30s whose crisp uniform and immaculate posture seem a rebuke to the prisoner's own filth and despair. The carefully constructed Nazi narrative begins to fray, not from a single dramatic tearing, but from 1,000 small, persistent abrasions against reality. The WWIIs are not the debauched, mannish caricatures from Der Stürmer. They are professional, strict, and largely impersonal. They enforce the rules, oversee work details, and manage the camp with a detached efficiency that denies the German women the perverse comfort of a hateful, sadistic enemy. You can't sustain righteous fury against a system that is primarily interested in schedules and sanitation. Elfrida, the nurse, is put to work in the camp infirmary. She works alongside an American Army nurse, Lieutenant Davis, a woman from Ohio with a dry sense of humor and an inexhaustible supply of coffee. They speak in a mixture of broken German and English, their shared language the universal one of medicine. Elfrida is stunned by the supply of penicillin, sulfa drugs, and clean bandages, luxuries that had vanished from German field hospitals months ago. Lieutenant Davis treats German and American alike, her focus purely on the wound, not the uniform. "A patient is a patient," she says one afternoon while dressing a burn on a German cook's arm. The simple statement lands with the force of a revelation. But the most profound and devastating assault on their worldview comes one rainy afternoon in July. The women of Barrack 17 are marched to the mess hall. A 16mm film projector has been set up. The lights go out. The film begins without a title card. It is jerky, silent, black and white footage. Piles of skeletal bodies being pushed into pits by bulldozers. Emaciated, ghost-like figures in striped pajamas, staring blankly from behind barbed wire. Ovens filled with human ash. The names are starkly typed onto the screen. Belsen, Dachau, Buchenwald. The room is utterly silent, save for the click-clack of the projector. Lieselot begins to sob, her hands covering her mouth. Others stare in stony disbelief. Hannah's heart pounds in her chest. Allied propaganda. It has to be. These are staged scenes, lies designed to demoralize them, to shame them. The Führer had been cleansing Germany of its enemies, the internal parasites. He was making Germany strong and pure. This is something else. This is an industrial-scale nightmare that defies comprehension. The film ends. The lights come up. Captain Roosevelt stands at the front of the room, her face grim. Beside her is a male officer, a major from the psychological warfare branch. He is a German Jew who escaped Berlin in 1938. He speaks to them in flawless, unaccented German. He doesn't shout, he doesn't accuse. His voice is quiet, filled with a terrible sadness. "This is what you fought for," he says, gesturing to the now blank screen. "This is the new order. This is the final victory." Hannah looks at the faces of the women around her. Some are openly weeping. Others, like her, wear masks of defiant anger. But behind the anger, a cold, terrifying question begins to worm its way into her soul. A memory surfaces. A train crammed with people, parked on a siding near her home in 1943. The faces behind the slats of the cattle cars. her mother pulling her away, saying, "Don't look, it's not our business." For the first time, Hannah allows herself to wonder, what if it wasn't a lie? What if this horror, this unbelievable, soul-crushing evil, was the truth? The Major looks directly at her, as if reading her mind. The world you believed in was a lie. Your real enemy was not waiting for you on the battlefield. He was in Berlin, giving you your orders. The screening of the concentration camp films shatters the fragile equilibrium of Barrack 17. The prisoners, once united by a shared nationality and a common fate, now fracture into bitter, distrustful factions. The air in the long, drafty room grows thick with whispered accusations and furious, hushed arguments that last long into the night. At one end are the unbreakables, women like Hannah, who cling to the remnants of their indoctrination with the tenacity of the drowning. "Propaganda," she spits at anyone who will listen, her voice a low, fierce hiss. "They are actors, starving Poles dressed in costumes. Do you really believe our leaders, our own German people, could do such things? It's a Jewish lie to poison us." Her words find purchase with a few of the older, more fanatical women. They form a small, tight knot of denial, reinforcing each other's disbelief, their shared identity now rooted not in victory, but in a defiant rejection of guilt. At the other end of the spectrum is Elfrida. The pragmatism that made her a good nurse now forces her to confront the evidence. She saw the film not as an ideological assault, but as a clinical diagnosis. The hollow eyes, the skeletal limbs, the signs of advanced malnutrition and disease, those were not things that could be easily faked. She sits on her bunk, night after night, stitching a torn uniform, her mind replaying not the film, but her own memories. A conversation with a wounded SS officer from the Eastern Front who spoke of special actions with a chilling lack of emotion. The pervasive smell of burning that once hung over a town near a labor camp she had passed. Small, disconnected moments that meant nothing at the time now click into place, forming a mosaic of horror. She begins to see her service not as patriotic duty, but as a form of complicity. She had been tending to the servants of a monstrous regime. The thought is a cancer, eating away at the very foundation of her self-respect. Lieselot exists in the terrified middle ground. Too young and impressionable to have formed the ironclad convictions of Hannah, yet too frightened to fully accept the implications of the films, she drifts like a ghost. She withdraws, speaking to no one, her hands constantly twisting the hem of her worn tunic. For her, the enemy was always a simple concept, the bomber pilot in the sky, the soldier with the foreign accent. Now the idea of the enemy has become complex and terrifying. If the Major was right, if their own government had been the true evil, then what did that make her? A dupe? A fool? An accomplice? The weight of the question is too much for her to bear. Her captors, the American WWIIs, fade into the background. Their daily routines, their roll calls, their work details become a monotonous backdrop to the real war, the one now being fought inside the barracks, inside their own minds. The real enemy is no longer the one with the gun, but the one who whispers in your memory, who forces you to question everything you once held sacred. The tension finally boils over one afternoon during a delousing inspection. A woman named Greta, whose husband had been killed at Stalingrad, breaks down, screaming that the films were true, that they had all been fools, that their husbands and sons had died for nothing but a gang of murderers. Hannah confronts her. "You dishonor his memory. You spit on his sacrifice." Greta turns on her, her face streaked with tears and fury. "No, you do. You and your blind faith. You're still saluting a ghost." She shoves Hannah hard. Hannah shoves back. The two women fall to the floor, scratching and clawing at each other, their fight less about the shove and more about the collapsing worlds they represent. A wax sergeant, a tall, broad-shouldered woman named Miller, pulls them apart with surprising strength. She doesn't scream or strike them. She simply holds them apart until their struggles cease. Later, she finds Hannah sitting alone behind the barracks, her face buried in her hands. Sergeant Miller doesn't say anything at first. She just stands there for a moment before lighting 2 cigarettes, handing one to Hannah. "Tough day," she says in quiet, passable German. Hannah expects a lecture, a punishment. Instead, the American woman sits down on the crate beside her. "I saw that film, too," Miller says, smoke curling from her lips. "I don't know what you're supposed to do with something like that. I just know hating each other in here won't fix a damn thing out there." The unexpected empathy, the simple shared humanity in that moment does what no order, no punishment, no piece of propaganda ever could. It shatters Hannah's defenses completely, leaving her feeling not angry or defiant, but utterly and terrifyingly alone. By the autumn of 1945, the atmosphere in the camp has undergone a profound transformation. The war in Europe is a distant memory. The war in the Pacific, a headline in the camp's mimeographed newspaper. The focus is no longer on confinement, but on a daunting, ambiguous process called re-education. The barbed wire still stands, but the psychological walls have shifted. Classes are now mandatory. Lectures on democratic principles, discussions about the structure of the American government, lessons in basic English. For many of the women, it is a bewildering experience. The ideologies that had been presented as absolute, scientific truths are now being dismantled piece by piece, replaced by concepts of individual liberty and civic responsibility that feel abstract and alien. Hannah sits in the back of the makeshift classroom, a converted mess hall. She no longer argues. The fire of her fanaticism has burned out, leaving behind a cold, hollow ash. She listens to the American instructor, a young lieutenant who speaks with earnest conviction about the separation of powers and the importance of a free press. She understands the words, but the concepts feel like they belong to another universe. Her universe had been one of loyalty, obedience, and sacrifice to a single infallible leader. To her, this new language of compromise and dissent sounds like a blueprint for chaos. Yet, she cannot deny the evidence of her own eyes. The system that preached chaos produced the order and overwhelming power that had crushed her nation. The system that preached order had produced the death camps and a continent of rubble. Letters from home begin to arrive more regularly, thin, flimsy envelopes bearing the postmarks of the Allied occupation zones. They are chronicles of survival in a broken world. Elfrida reads a letter from her sister in Hamburg. The city is a wasteland of ruins. People live in cellars, foraging for food. There is no work, no law, only hunger and the British military government trying to impose order. The enemy, her sister describes, is not a brute, but an administrator, the one doling out ration cards and organizing rubble-clearing brigades. The world has been turned completely upside down. The victors, the ones they were told would destroy Germany, are now the ones preventing it from starving. One day, Captain Roosevelt posts a list on the barracks bulletin board. It is the first list of women scheduled for repatriation. Lieselott's name is on it. She stares at it, her face pale. She is going home. But what is home? Her family's apartment in Dresden was vaporized in the firebombing. Her parents are gone. Her brother is missing on the Eastern Front. Going home means being released into a wasteland where she knows no one and has nothing. The fear of captivity is replaced by the even greater fear of freedom in a world that no longer makes sense. The WWIIs, once seen as jailers, now seem like the only source of stability in her life. They represent 3 meals a day, a roof over her head, a world with rules. Outside the wire is a terrifying void. Hannah's release comes in January 1946. She is processed out, given a set of civilian clothes donated by an American charity, a simple wool skirt and a blouse that feels strange and foreign against her skin. She is handed discharge papers, a travel voucher for a train to what is now the American zone, and a small parcel of food. As she stands with a small group of other women at the main gate, Sergeant Miller is there, supervising the departure. She walks over to Hannah. "Vogel," she says, her German still clumsy, but clear. "Good luck." Hannah looks at the American woman, her former guard, her former enemy. She sees no triumph in Miller's eyes, only a deep human wariness, the look of someone who has seen too much and is ready for it all to be over. Hannah can only nod in response. The gate swings open. She takes a step, and then another, out of the contained world of the camp and into the raw, windswept landscape of post-war France. Before her lies a journey across a shattered continent, back to a home she may not recognize, to face a past she can never escape. The enemy was not the tired-eyed GI, the professional nurse, or the wary sergeant. The true enemy was the lie she had been willing to die for. And now, in the ruins of that lie, she had to learn how to live.